As I said, my name is Kevin O'Gorman. I've been privileged to work on SecureDrop as part of Freedom of the Press Foundation since 2018, and today I have the honor of presenting the 2022 State of the Drop. So, let me just bring this up here. This is a big one. One of many of Aaron Swartz's many collaborations was with journalist Kevin Polson. Haha. So now you can all see my notes. So let's do the first interview. Not that one. Yeah. So let's go back. Oh, thanks. If you all think this is bad, one time back in the days of overhead projectors, I gave an entire presentation with forgetting to take the backing of any of the acetates. And so nobody pointed it out until maybe about 2/3 of the way through. So I really appreciate the help.
Okay.
It was great.
There you go.
Awesome. So let's hit the, go
open
to,
up another window.
sorry, open this and open another window?
Yeah. So you've got this one.
So if I hit that, is that what we want to do?
It's in Safari is where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think. Let's try that one, and we'll wanna. Which display did I undone? Okay. Slideshow. Oh, it must yes.
How's that looking?
There you go. So you'll be able to do this interview on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emma. So let's see. Can I actually advance the slide? Okay. Yeah, so as I said, hi, my name's Kevin. I've been working with the Freedom of the Press Foundation since July of 2018 on SecureDrop, and today I'm going to be talking about the current state of the system. Let's move to the next slide. Sorry? This thing is still. We're so close. get that to the other screen, then that would be
Yeah, I
easier.
think if you just drag that one over there, maybe that looks promising.
Up,
Oh,
down.
I think left. The exact opposite direction you expect.
Can you see it over there?
Yeah. Keep going.
That didn't work. And that's progress. So I'm trying to get to the. Tell me when I'm on the
Yeah,
title bar.
here. Left.
Lower. You got it. You got it. Okay, good.
Okay, down it comes.
And then,
Now, are you still gonna be able to control it? Keep it full screen or?
If I can get the cursor back. Where did the cursor go? Cursor's there. Cursor's over here. So let's try going back one and see if that does. Yes, we do.
Okay, can you make it full screen now or? Let's go with.
here. Let's see if I can use this backwards.
Okay.
Oh. So close.
Woohoo! Once again, thank you very much. Now all I need to do is get the cursor over on this side, and we are good to go unless I manage to screw something up. Looking good? So, one of Aaron's many collaborations was with journalist Kevin Poulsen and then with the late James Dolan to develop an online whistleblowing system which was originally called SecureDrop. He made the first code commit to this project on June 29, 2011, and the first instance was actually launched in May of 2013 by the New Yorker. In October of 2013, FPF, recognizing the importance of the system, basically assumed stewardship of the project and renamed it to SecureDrop. So what was Aaron actually trying to solve with this system? Simply put, the problem he was trying to solve was that of surveillance via metadata. Historically, if investigators wanted to get information about a journalist's sources, if they would have to resort to mostly physical means. So physical surveillance, intimidation, even like, arrest and prosecution of journalists to force them to really, or to kind of release information about their sources. Nowadays, by the end of the 20th century, that was no longer true. All they had to do was basically go and find records from telecommunications companies, records from internet service providers, whether they got those records legally or otherwise, and then basically just infer journalist contacts and communications from that information. And nowadays, you can add basically social networks to that, you can add mobile application service providers to that. There are a wealth of data available to folks who are looking to de-anonymize sources. So SecureDrop was designed specifically to break the metadata link between journalists and sources and to take compromisable third parties out of the equation. So let's talk a little bit about how it does that. So organizations that use SecureDrop, will host the instance on premises. This guards against it being basically, interfered with by a third party. It guards against, for example, a government subpoenaing like a hosting provider to get access to the servers without the organization's knowledge. All communication takes place over Tor to protect source anonymity and to minimize the amount of kind of communications metadata that's actually created. And sources are usually guided to use Tor browser and to have at least a basic level of operational security, in the way that they use it. Source communications are encrypted on delivery to the system and can only be decrypted on a dedicated air-gapped system. And finally, the software is free software under the AGPL and is also subject to regular security audits. This doesn't guarantee that it will be bug-free, but it does increase the level of trust that organizations can place in it, and it does mean that if bugs are found, they will get fixed. So it's used by about 70 organizations worldwide that we know about, ranging from large media organizations like the New York Times or The Guardian, to groups with a narrower focus, like Whistleblower Aid in the US and the OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. And every year we add new SecureDrop's. So for example, this year we added the British Broadcasting Corporation. Lawrence Lessig set up his own SecureDrop. And the Good Law Project in the UK also were added to the fold. One thing to note about this is that many of these organizations were deployed, or these instances were deployed with no involvement from FPF. The system is very, it is feasible for organizations to run their own SecureDrop's, set it up all, totally independently. This kind of decentralization is a benefit both of SecureDrop itself and of free software in general. So let's take a minute to talk about FPF, who are currently the stewards of the system. FPF is a US-based nonprofit dedicated to protecting, defending, and empowering 21st century public interest journalism. We do this in a number of ways. We advocate for journalists and whistleblowers in the US and worldwide. We work via the Press Freedom Tracker. We document every press freedom violation in the US. And we produce digital security guides and train journalists in the field. A lot of journalists, in fact. I think the count this year so far is 1,200 journalists trained. And probably more will be added before the end of the year. And we write software to support investigative journalism. Our most well-known and long-running project is actually SecureDrop, but we also recently started maintaining and developing Michael Lee's Danger Zone application. This is a container-based solution for document sanitization. It's a really important part of the puzzle for journalists working with digital files, especially files sent randomly to them online. So it's great that we can help help keep moving that forward. And here is the current SecureDrop team, most of whom are actually in the building today. We're participating in the hackathon over the next 2 days. We've managed to grow the team a bit this year, thanks in no small part to support from the Filecounter Foundation, and currently have 8 folks working full-time on SecureDrop. Other teams in FPF are also contributing to SecureDrop. So, for example, folks working in security engineering, folks working to coordinate with newsrooms, and our user experience and design team. The digital securities team, or teams remit, also includes newsroom training for SecureDrop, which is a critical part of making sure that folks are using it safely. So let's talk really quickly about how it actually works. The system consists of 2 servers behind a dedicated firewall, the application and monitor servers. The monitor server runs an intrusion detection system to look for anything sus going on with either server, and the application server runs 2 onion services. One service that sources use to submit files and messages, and that went way too far. And an authenticated onion service that journalists and admins use to download encrypted submissions and administer the system. The difference between the two being that the first service is public, the second service is private and locked down. In the original system, once a journalist downloads a submission, they then have to take it to a dedicated air-gapped workstation, usually or running Tails, in order to decrypt and view it. This, from the point of view of journalists, is a big bottleneck in terms of time. Round-trip times for working with submissions can be over an hour, and the tools available to journalists on the actual air-gapped station can be pretty minimal, which means that they will likely need to transfer files to another computer in order to work with them. This can be a risky proposition, given that they are also likely to be targeted by malware submitted via SecureDrop. So, to address this, in 2017, FPF started prototyping a workstation that would make things faster and easier for journalists while preserving the important security properties of the system. Naming things is like the hardest thing in the world, so we just called it SecureDrop Workstation. We began a pilot process with a small group of news orgs in early 2020 and have been working to improve the system based on their feedback ever since. So it basically replaces a couple of steps in the workflow. By doing so, simplifies things for journalists, requiring just a single workstation. This allows journalists to work with submissions without having to resort to sneakernet, like transferring files across via USB, but also while preserving the air gap. These kind of goals, when you say them out loud, kind of sound like they're in conflict with each other, and they kind of are. So in order to resolve these, we have to use an interesting technology, and that is the Qubes operating system. So, in the words of the Qubes teams themselves, Qubes is a reasonably secure operating system built on top of the Zen hypervisor. It allows us pretty much to accomplish everything we did with the previous workflow, but on one machine. I'm not going to go into too much details of the features of Qubes right now, but again, we're here for the entire weekend, so please feel free to come and talk to us about it. So the underlying architecture of the system that we've built on Qubes is actually pretty complex. but you don't need to expose that complexity to journalists. Instead, what they see is a Qt-based chat application that will automatically sync and decrypt messages, that will download and decrypt files on demand, and allow you to do all of that pretty much instantaneously without the need to move USB sticks around. When a journalist actually views a file, it's actually opened in or that has been downloaded via the system. It's opened in a non-networked one-time environment called a disposable VM. This is another way that we protect against potential malware. Like the original SecureDrop code, SecureDrop Workstation has been audited a few times, most recently in late 2020 with broadly positive results. And you can find the results of all of our audits along with basically information and research about SecureDrop itself at securedrop.org/research. We'll actually have a running instance of SecureDrop, including the workstation, available all weekend for folks who want to check it out. Just look for our tables downstairs or talk to anybody wearing a similar logo to this. So let's talk a little bit about changes that we've made in 2022. SecureDrop is still something that's under active development, not just with the workstation, but also on the server side. So let's see what we've been doing. Over 2022, we actually ended up pushing out 9 server code releases. Some notable changes included in those releases were a visual redesign of the source interface, the interface that sources use for uploads, basic anti-spam measures, because we've been seeing an uptick in nuisance submissions and unwanted submissions for some like high volume instances, so we decided to address that. And the decoupling of custom kernel and Tor updates so that we can release different parts of the system on a more natural schedule without as much overhead and be a little bit more responsive. On the workstation side, we also ended up pushing out 9 releases, split between the chat client that I showed you earlier and the underlying system itself. Some highlights there included a major migration from Cubes 4.0 to Cubes 4.1, updating to Debian Bullseye for the virtual machines involved in the system, and the new 5 series custom kernel. We also included some user interface improvements, including faster safe deletion, and with the help of a contributor working with us with the Outreachy mentorship program, we also added read receipts for journalist replies, which was a nice little feature. So in terms of future plans that we actually have for SecureDrop, let's talk a little bit about those. Let's see. Beep. So, SecureDrop has been around for a while. We've been using, or it's written in Python, and we've been using the Python GNU-PG library for quite a while. Said library is kind of starting to show its age, basically in terms of maintainership and so forth. And luckily, the Sequoia project has come along, and so we've been looking and planning to start using Sequoia basically with Python bindings instead. That work is ongoing, and we're hoping to get it out there soon. We're also working on more updates to the user interface for sources to simplify the initial submission process. On the workstation side, we're improving print and export functionality and making system updates snappier so that basically the journalist experience is even better. We're also planning across both the server and workstation to add more anti-spam features, and we've just started a new user research study, which is like academically backed, whose results will inform future development across the board. So, let's talk a little bit about our long-term plans for SecureDrop. And this gets a little fuzzy, so please bear with me. So one long-term goal that we have is to update SecureDrop server itself, moving away from GPG altogether and allowing for the use of cryptography with a wider set of properties. If we do so, if we actually try to do this, we have a few interesting problems to solve because we quickly run up against the issue of having to actually run basically secure code that on the client side. But it would also unlock a lot more flexibility for sources and for organizations who want to use the system. Our other major goal for the next little while is to basically increase the number or increase the user base of SecureDrop Workstation itself. And to do that, we plan to first, among other things, we need to make the provisioning process easier, we need to support more flexible document processing workflows, and we need to continue to improve the overall user experience. Let's just throw this one up here. So Here we see Aaron's first commit against the project, all the way back in June of 2011. Just to give you an idea of how active SecureDrop still is, since FPF took over stewardship in 2013, we've seen over 3,600 PRs against the project. In fact, I think when I wrote this slide, we were at 38 in the past 30 days, and I think we're now at about 42. Around over 200 contributors over the life of the project, and an interest and engagement with this small portion of Aaron's legacy that's basically continued unabated to this day. Some of the larger contributions we've seen lately, including a full rewrite of our functional test suite, have actually come from folks that are not part of the core team, but just basically dedicated to SecureDrop. So this is the part where I say that you can help too. We're here, we're set up for the weekend, we're available. Most of the FPF SecureDrop team is here to help you get set up on hacking, either online or on-site with us here, or remotely. So please come and talk to us. We'll be available for the next 2 days.
And questions? Okay, great. We've got a lot of questions. Did you say you had a question? Okay.
Hello. I am curious about verification of the content. The last speaker was talking about how the person who is dropping off the whistleblower information gets verified.
Well, that's an interesting property of the system, is unfortunately there really isn't a way to verify them. One of the goals of SecureDrop is to guarantee complete anonymity for sources, and I think one of the points of tension for an awful lot of newsrooms, and more for the editors of those newsrooms, is there's often that comes into conflict with their own kind of journalistic guidelines. So we kind of don't really get involved in the verification of sources. What we do is provide for organizations to actually allow anonymous sources to upload stuff, and then use the processes that they have to actually confirm the veracity of the documents, and in some cases, if folks are okay with it, the actual identity of the folks uploading it. But by itself, the system guarantees anonymity and doesn't provide for that.
So the other issue with this is, for example, I'm involved with humanitarian work, and a lot of the non-biased reporting comes from first-hand information in the field, usually in war zones.
Mm-hmm.
And those people might compromise their missions by giving information. They can give it anonymously, but then they would probably be identifiable given their unique locations and access. Is there any way to
Yeah. So for sources that are actually looking to basically remove kind of identifying metadata from, or there are tools available for them to do that, but I think there is probably a definite technical hurdle for folks actually wanting to do that. One of the goals of SecureDrop Workstation is to basically have different kind of file processing workflows in place to allow journalists to actually remove kind of identifiable metadata. Let's say they include in an extreme case GPS coordinates in a photograph. That's disastrous, right? So one of the goals for SecureDrop Workstation is to make it easier to make sure that that kind of data is excised specifically to protect sources in those kind of environments.
Okay, great. We have another question.
Go for it.
I'm interested in knowing what the current state of the art is on reducing image resolution and color depth to prevent the kinds of identification materials such as were used to catch reality winner, the yellow dots in the background.
Oh, right,
People
yes.
might take a photograph of a document with a cell phone. Cell phones these days have very high resolution and deep colors. Is there any way you can deliberately reduce that resolution and color depth to prevent that kind of identification?
I mean, yeah, that kind of image processing is not something that SecureDrop itself would actually be responsible for. But again, there would be tools available for doing that. And one of the goals of the workstation is to kind of surface those more easily. Unfortunately, I don't know too much about the specifics of that particular case. But I'm sure there's somebody on the team who could help if you do have questions.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
I was just wondering, for the workstation, I know it says it's still in beta, is that correct?
It's basically, rather than saying it's still in beta, it is an open source project and it is available for folks to install themselves, and some folks have. What we've tried to do is run basically a pilot program where we have a core group of people who are working with it, on a daily basis and communicating back to us basically their experiences with it, so we can kind of improve it as we go. But it isn't in beta per se.
So is the current main obstacle to further adoption the fact that it's technically difficult to set up and provision the workstation?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Okay, we have another question.
Thank you. I'm sneaking in. It's Rowan from the SecureDrop team. It's a comment for the person who was asking about image resolution. If that's something that you're interested in, please do come and chat with us during the hackathon. For folks who are interested in that kind of post-processing stuff, the Danger Zone project specifically is very related. So please do come find us.
Yeah, and one of the things particularly heartbreaking about the Reality Winner story, in my opinion, is that she really endangered herself when she sort of rushed to take action with information that she thought people needed, that the world needed to know, instead of thinking it through, instead of contacting organizations ahead of time, instead of making sure that you weren't going to throw your life under the bus like she did. And so she's really a good example of that kind of thing. Think it through. It seems like you got to do it right then, but you don't. You can wait days or weeks to do it. Promise, okay? And just don't do anything rash, because it never works out well. Okay, any other questions? I saw other hands before. Did you have a question? No? Okay, no other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Oh,
And
thank
remember,
you.